Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Penn Vicarage on this Thursday morning. Great to see you, and I'm so glad you could join us for our Bible talk today. Just by way of update, I thought I might. The work has started in church on the new heating system. It's going to take a couple of months to do. They've been digging up the trench down the south aisle in the church, and I believe they've already found about £13 worth of cash, amongst various other shillings and various other things. It's not going to pay for the project, but it all helps, doesn't it? I'm delighted to say that they haven't yet discovered the bones of King Richard III or anything like that. Mildly relieved about that. But anyway, work is going on. It's great to see it happening and looking forward to nice, warm and toasty church by Christmas. Looking forward to that. But I'm waffling on. We're thinking about the Bible this morning. We're in Mark's Gospel and we're in chapter 9. Just to remind you, Jesus has just been transfigured before his disciples. He's come down from the mountain and he's met this man with the demon-possessed son and so on. He's had a few conversations with people, and we're moving on. And then he goes on them. Then he starts his gradual move down south. So here we go. Mark's Gospel, chapter 9, starting to read at verse 30. They went on from there and passed through Galilee. He didn't want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, "The Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him, and 3 days after being killed, he will rise again." But they did not understand what he was saying, and were afraid to ask him. Then they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent, for on the way they'd argued with one another who was the greatest. He sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be the first must be last and servant of all." They took a little child and put it among them, and taking it in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, as I've been explaining the last few days, Mark's Gospel has 16 chapters. And basically, the first 8 chapters in Jesus has been showing by doing some amazing miracles and signs and so on that he is the Messiah by his authority over sickness and all these other things, death and everything else. Jesus has shown he's got authority over these things and he is the Messiah. He's demonstrated by the things he did, by the things he said and so on, that he's the main man. But in chapter 8-9, he then starts showing them what kind of Messiah he's going to be. And he's already explained to them that he's going to die. He's going to die for the people and he's going to rise again. And I think you have to kind of understand that for them, that is just so not what they were expecting. They were in occupied territory, and that they were, by all means, they'll be expecting God's main man, when God's main man come and boot out these nasty Romans. That's what they were expecting. And so the Messiah that Jesus was going to be, or had come to be, was not at all the Messiah they were expecting. And I think that's the reason why Jesus takes his disciples a lot on their own. Instead of being public, he takes them. He spends a lot more time with them on their own, trying to get them to understand. Because it's so, as I say, it's so not what they were expecting. And I think that's why when he went through Galilee, he did it quietly. He didn't want crowds anymore. He wanted his disciples to get the message that yes, he's the Messiah, but he's the Messiah who's going to die and rise again for us. And this is why I think he says a second, because he's already said it once. In fact, he goes on to say it a third time in the next chapter. He spells it out for them again, that the Son of Man is going to be betrayed he's going to be given over into human hands. He's going to die and he's going to rise again. So he said it once already, and now he's saying it again. Because I say, it's vital that the disciples get it. And it's so, as I say, it's so not at all what they were expecting. That's why he says it again. And to make the point, he uses like a play on words, like a bit like a joke, The Son of Man will be betrayed into the hands of men. So he uses the men thing. And isn't it ironic that the very people that Jesus came to save, humanity, are the very same people that put Jesus on the cross? So he uses this kind of play on words, that the Son of Man, as he calls himself, is going to be betrayed into the hands of men, and he's going to die and rise again. But as I say, it's because it's so not what they were expecting, they still don't get it. But he spends lots of time with them on their own, trying to reinforce this. And then they go on this journey, and they get to their destination. And Jesus asks them, because they've clearly been, I suspect he probably wasn't looking, or they did it quietly behind his back or something. The disciples always had this argument on the way. And Jesus asks them, what were you arguing about on the way? And they're kind of embarrassed because they kind of know they shouldn't have been, because they've been arguing about which of them is going to be the greatest, which of them's the greatest. And you can see why they were embarrassed. Here's he talking about laying down his life for the world, and yet they're banging on about which of them is going to be the greatest. And Jesus' response, though, is quite interesting. He talks about with the last must become first, and if we to become first, then you have to be the servant of all. And he then goes on to, he picks up a child and says, whoever welcomes a child like this welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. And I think it's interesting here, Jesus doesn't say that there's no such thing as greatness, but they've been arguing with each other about which is the greatest. He doesn't say that there's no such thing as greatness. Nor does he get very sentimental about being childlike and children, and that in a sense that talk about being childlike comes later. He doesn't say that. What he doesn't is, instead of saying there's no such thing as greatness, instead of saying that we're all basically egalitarian and we're all the same, he doesn't say that at all. He does say that there's great, but instead of saying there's no such thing as greatness, instead he tells us what true greatness is. And he tells us in no uncertain terms that true greatness is about service. True greatness is not about putting number one ahead. As I think I told you a couple of days ago, the word sin is a 3-letter word with I in the middle of it. That true greatness is about service, and whoever wants to be the first must be the servant of all. So it is possible to be great, but the way to be great is by being a servant of other people. It's not by having the right titles and all the right qualifications and so on. To be truly great is about serving others. That's what it's about. And then he talks about welcoming children. And I think we overcomplicate this. Children are above everything. Children are small. And I think what he's saying here, and in those days, of course, they were, in a sense, they were smaller in society as well. Children had very little status until they reached the age of 11, especially female children. And Jesus grabs a child, somebody of no significance, and he puts them in his arms and says, whoever welcomes one of these welcomes me. And so what he's talking about is he's talking about the little people, really. And he's basically saying that if you want to be great, you've got to be a servant. But if you're going to be great, you've got to be welcoming to the little people as well. And that's what true greatness is. I remember being in Jamaica a few years ago on a sabbatical, and I was on the streets of Kingston once, and I met this beggar on the streets who told me that this man called Bishop Spence had been very good to him. The Bishop Spence he was acknowledged, I think, to be one of the finest priests that Jamaica's ever had. And Bishop Spence had been the vicar of the largest church in the West Indies at the time, in Kingston. There's actually a picture of it behind me. That picture you can't quite see, there's a picture of St Andrew Parish Church there. And he was the vicar there. A large church, and yet, despite having all these hundreds of people in his congregation, Bishop Spence had spent time with this man. And an eminent solicitor who knew Bishop Spence well said a very profound thing to me. He said, and this applies to women as well as men, he said, a great man shows his greatness by the way he treats the little people. And actually, I thought that was so profound. And in church life, the person that makes the tea, the person that dusts the church, the person that cleans whatever, is just as important as everybody else. And that's really important to remember. And that he's talking here about what true greatness is about. And Jesus says that true greatness is not about lording it over anybody else. It's not about position. It's not about status or authority. It's not lording authority over people. What he says here is that true greatness is to be found by service. And true greatness is about welcoming and having a really warm welcome for little people as well as important people. That everybody is welcome in the house of God. And so we have this very, very powerful reading. In the first part of it, Jesus reminds his disciples that he is going to lay down his life for us. That having shown he's the Messiah, he now shows us what kind of Messiah he's going to be. He's going to lay down his life for the world. That's what he's going to do. And that's the whole focus of the rest of Mark's Gospel. That's the first thing he says. And in the second reading, in the face of these disciples arguing about which of them is the greatest, rather than saying there isn't such a thing as greatness, he shows them what true greatness is. And true greatness is about serving others. And true greatness is about being welcoming to the little people as well as the big people. God bless you. More tomorrow. Hope you have a lovely day. Please don't forget to share these messages with your friends so other people can enjoy them.